This is Barbara from Second Wind EB-5, and in today's video, what we're going to do is to discuss what redeployment is. And we're going to do it together with Matthew Hogan, who is the Vice President of Project Development in one of the oldest and largest regional centers in the US. Matthew, thank you so much for finding time for this video.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
When I talk to investors, I always try to postpone the moment we discuss redeployment because it's very complicated. And apart from that, there is so many things in EB-5 to be understood and digested. But when the investors are ready to proceed with project selection, I make sure they do understand what redeployment is, especially with current processing time. They just should understand how it's working before they invest money. So, Matthew, how would you define what is redeployment?
Yeah, so redeployment is really only impacting, and I'll kind of try and simplify the answer on redeployment, because redeployment really only impacts investors traditionally from countries like China, India, and Vietnam who have very long backlogs. But it can also impact investors from other countries that don't have backlogs, for the point that you just made. Sometimes those adjudication timelines can be very long. Before the passage of the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, the program always required that investors continued to keep their funds invested in the EB-5 partnership and at risk for the 2 years of their conditional residency period. That period starts when they get their conditional green card, and it ends when they file their I-829 petition, so about 24 months. But if it takes you 3 years or maybe over 3 years to get your I-526 petition adjudicated, you may be well into the overall length of an EB-5 project, which typically lasts for somewhere between 4 and 7 years. So if you're an investor from a country, even if you're not facing a backlog, you may not get that conditional green card until year 3. Well, if you're in a project that's very successful, the developer may look to repay that project in year 4. Well, then what happens? The money comes back to the EB-5 partnership, but the US government actually requires that those funds be redeployed or reinvested into a new at-risk project. It's very controversial because, of course, investors are saying, hey, I already took all of these risks on this first project. I created the jobs I needed. Why do I have to do it again? That's not fair. And, frankly, we agree. What occurs at that point in time is it becomes incumbent upon the regional center to provide the EB-5 investor with the best opportunity or the new reinvestment project that will keep those funds at risk, and keep those funds at risk through the timeline that the EB-5 investor needs in order to complete their EB-5 immigration pursuit.
When we talk about your projects, let's say it's a project and the loan was repaid, and investors are in the different stages in their process. Do you redeploy all the funds in one other project, or it can be multiple projects?
Great question. So typically what happens when a borrower repays, we review the entire partnership. CMB has investors from 104 different countries. And so a partnership we might have investors from 20, 30, 40 different countries in it. And so we'll look at investors who might have longer wait times, those investors from China, India, or Vietnam. And then we'll look at investors who might have shorter time periods where funds might need to be redeployed. And we'll often make more than one loan. We might make a loan that's a little bit longer term to protect the group of investors who need those funds to be redeployed for a little bit longer. And then we'll look at, shorter term loans, maybe 1 or 2 year loans like bridge loans or temporary operating loans to existing businesses and things of that nature that will allow those partnerships to create liquidity a little bit sooner to meet the needs of investors who start to become eligible, shortly after that redeployment. Our goal is always to make sure that the investor can get their money back as soon as possible. It's just good business.
Great, because one of the worries of investors that actually they invest in the project and they know that the loan is for 6 years, and once time comes, they actually their money are deployed for another 6 years. That's definitely what they don't want to see. But if we talk about your regional center, do you provide a choice of the project where money would be redeployed or not?
Great question. Traditionally, and to answer your question, no, we have not provided a choice. And the reason for that is when we have investors invest into CMB's partnerships, we want them to be completely comfortable with who we are as a company, our history, our track record, the groups that we work with. And we want them to have confidence in us as a fiduciary that we're going to continue to put them in the best position for success for their EB-5 pursuit. Other regional centers in the industry have provided options, and it's been controversial in the past. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Some investors or some regional centers rather, might advertise that they provide, an option A and an option B. But what if the investors don't like either option? Well, you might have the partnership stall, or you might have lawsuits or infighting within that offering. The other thing that we've seen regional centers who really want the investors to go into option A, so they'll make option B a really bad option. So traditionally they'll pick the one that they want to go, so that it kind of becomes an illusion. What option do you really have? What we try and do, and of course we fully disclose this, we talk about how CMB will continue to maintain control and discretion over those reinvestments if it's necessary. But what we try and do is we try and meet the needs of that entire partnership, because when an investor invests, they really no longer control just that $800,000 increment. They're a part of an ownership interest of a larger partnership. And we can't have the partnership stall because there's infighting or there's indecision or there's lawsuits that have been held against the partnership because of investors that aren't comfortable with the options that have been provided to them.
And in regards of the interest which investors actually getting from their investment, is there any change when redeployment happens?
No, so those stay the same. And the reason for that is, when we redeploy, we try and redeploy into projects that meet all the same underwriting criteria that are very similar to the original EB-5 projects that the investors invested into, whenever possible. If we're talking about shorter term projects like bridge loans, typically they're bridging new EB-5 investment opportunities. So as we raise new EB-5 funds, they're backing down those funds. And so when we're trying to find those projects, we're also pricing those projects similarly to the way that the original project was underwritten and the way the original loan was priced. So there's not an incremental increase in the overall revenue generated for the partnership.
Thank you so much for explanation. I hope it was interesting and useful. Thank you for your time, Matthew.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. And if you guys want to learn more about EB-5, please check our previous videos, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.